Hello, everyone, those that are joining us here in the Zoom and those that might be joining us via Facebook Live. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you all for coming and sharing space with us today. We're just going to give just a few more seconds here for some of those that are with us live here in the Zoom webinar to jump on. But we just wanted to say good afternoon, good morning in some places that might be listening. To everyone out there, all of our students, all of our community members, all of our practitioners, just welcome to today's American Indian Graduate Center webinar that's focusing on first-year graduate student experiences. And so I am today's moderator, Dr. Corey Still. I am the Director of Student Programming and Research for American Indian Graduate Center, where I've been with the company now for a little over 2 years. But I've been affiliated with the organization for well over 12 years. I'm really happy and honored to be here with you today. I'm really excited to be joined by a number of amazing colleagues that are surrounding me on the Zoom session right now. I'm super excited to be able to hear the words that they're going to share with you today and just kind of engage in conversation. So as we move through this, I want to encourage all those that are with us live via Zoom, feel free to put in the chat where you're from, what level you are, if you're a grad student, if you're a professional, if you're a community member, let us know where you're from. If you have questions at any time, please feel free to put those in the chat and we will do our best to address all the questions that come in. But if you're with us on Facebook Live right now, also please feel free to let us know where you're watching from. And if you have any questions, post in the comments. We have our team members that are monitoring those comments and sending them to me live. I cannot talk English this morning, I apologize, or afternoon. So we will make sure to get all the comments and questions as we can as we go through. So first off, I would like to go ahead and let one of my colleagues and team members, Arlen Yazi, introduce herself. So Arlen.
Yad shikita joshidene shay Arlen Yazi and shia not odanet kochi initially ashiham pashishin chishidashite tokilatini additionally. Hello everyone, my name is Arlen Yazi. I am the Rising Native Graduates Program Manager. I am from the Navajo Nation. I'm living out here in Lacey, Washington. And I'm pretty new to starting with AIGC. So I've been with the organization for about 4 months now. And I definitely am very, very excited to be sharing this space with everyone here today.
Thank you so much, Arlen. So before we jump into things, I do want to do the formal introductions of our 3 other panelists. And then we will definitely let them and provide space for them to introduce themselves in the way that they see fit. But our first panelist today is Mr. James Wagnon. James is a current graduate student and American Indian Graduate Center scholar at the University of Oklahoma. James is Cherokee Nation, originally from Tahlequah, Oklahoma. He's happily married to his high school sweetheart, Mariah, and they have a beautiful 3-year-old daughter, Davia, or Day Day, as a lot of us call her. JJ is a second-year doctoral student at the University of Oklahoma, where he's majoring in adult and higher education. He currently works as a graduate research assistant for the Educational Leadership and Policy Studies Department, and his research interests include Indigenous masculinities, Indigenous leadership, and utilizing community building as a strategy for success. So thank you, JJ, for being with us. Thank you, James, for being with us. Our next panelist that we have with us today is Kristen Talbert. And Kristen is the program coordinator for Indigenous Leadership Academy, and also an American Indian Graduate Center alumni, but she works with the American Indian Policy Institute. Kristen is the project coordinator, as we said, for the Indigenous Leadership Academy at the American Indian Policy Institute. She has 12 years of nonprofit case management, data collection, and teaching experience, as well as a project and program planning. Her career has focused on the Indian Child Welfare Act and connecting American Indian families with resources to provide them with the best outcomes for success. She has previously served as the St. Paul Urban Representative for the Indian Child Welfare Advisory Council for the Minnesota Department of Human Services, a member of the Indian Education Advisory Council for Arizona Department of Education, and Vice President of the Temple Union High School District Indian Education Parent Advisory Committee. Kristen is currently pursuing her MBA at the W.P. Carey School of Business at Arizona State University. So Kristen, thank you so much for being with us here again today. And last, but certainly not least, is Dr. Salena Beaumont Hill. Dr. Hill is the Director of Inclusive Excellence and is also an American Indian Graduate Center alumni at the University of Montana. Dr. Hill is a member of the Crow Nation and a descendant of the Blackfeet Nation. She holds a bachelor's of science in counseling psychology from the University of Great Falls, a master's of arts degree in counseling education with emphasis in school counseling from the University of Montana, and her PhD in counseling education and supervision from the University of Montana. She has spent her career working in student support services with programs serving Native American college students at AIGC, University of Montana, Little Bighorn College. Her work in college access and student advocacy has been very rewarding. And again, that's led her to this awesome title that she has and this awesome position she has as the Director of Inclusive Excellence and for Student Success. So again, Dr. Beaumont Hill, thank you so much for being with us. And so I'm actually going to go ahead and just open it up. We'll go back in that order if you all want to provide any more details or anything like that. So James, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so Osio Nigata, James Dawodoa. Hello everyone, my name is James, or as everybody else calls me, JJ. Yeah, like Corey, Dr. still said, from Tahlequah, Oklahoma, born and raised here all my life. So got to grow up with tons of culture and community and kind of just carried that with me throughout my higher education career. And I'm really just hoping can provide that valuable insight and knowledge to everyone else watching. And yeah, I'm very happy to be here, very excited to be here. So.
Thank you so much, James. We're excited for you to be here as well. Kristen, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Nitakiapi, Ampetu Kinde Owasi Chante Washtea na Pechi Uzapie, Kristen Talbert and Makiapie, Sisituan Wapetuan Hematahaye, Phoenix, Arizona, Edwatie, Henana, Hedamayaye. It's with a good heart that I shake hands with all of you. My name is Kristen Talbert. I am a member of the Sisseton Wahpeton Dakota Oyate, and I currently live in Phoenix, Arizona. I have a daughter who recently started her undergrad journey, so I'm excited to share what I've learned with all of you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Beaumont Hill.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am joining you from the homelands of the Salish and Kalispel people here in Montana. The university is currently on their traditional lands, and so I want to honor that. I also have two students who are undergraduates right now, one majoring in business and one undecided, and I definitely support that. So just excited to talk about my graduate journey and hopefully answer questions and help you make the decision that you need to make to go on to graduate school. But excited to be here and still participating with AIGC advocacy around education.
Thank you so much. So again, to all of our listeners, whether it be with us in the Zoom webinar or those that are listening on Facebook Live, please feel free to shout out where you're from. If you're in school, if you have students who are in school, or your parents with children in school, but we're going to go ahead and just open up the conversation today about first-year graduate experience. And so we know that all of us sitting here have gone through the undergraduate experience and have had that transition from high school to college, and we had a great series of panelists yesterday that talked about the importance and the transition from high school to undergrad. But there's another transition that happens, right? So they have that transition from undergrad to graduate, which for a lot of people who might not have experienced it will be like, well, you're still in school, right? You're still going, you're still in college, you're still in school. But I think we can agree there's definitely a shift in thinking that occurs when you leave your undergraduate program and go into a graduate program. And so the first question I just kind of want to pose to the panelists here is, for you all, what was some of the major differences between your undergraduate work and then moving into your graduate work. So what were some of those major differences, or just like an aha moment you might have had as you transitioned out of undergrad into graduate? And we'll go ahead and start off with Arlen, and then we'll just kind of go from there.
I get to give a unique perspective. So I'm currently seeking graduate school and have gone through the process of knowing that, but I've also had the experience of knowing what it's like to be out of undergrad for a total of 11 years. So just knowing that in comparison, really going forward, it is kind of taking a lot of the different tools and things that I've learned from just being out in the nonprofit world and really navigating higher education, more so in terms of reading and knowing things from different states. And I'm hoping that's kind of what I get to experience just with the first semester of graduate school, of knowing that all the research and everything else that I've done can help actually really solidify what I'm going to school for. But I will say undergrad seemed a whole lot easier because there was a whole lot more collaboration and just being able to, I just feel like it was easier. But yeah, I'll pass it to James. Let's see what you have.
Yeah, so for me, some of the major differences between undergrad and graduate work, I think, were hours. So typically, with undergrad, 12 hours is full-time, and grad school, 9-6, depending on institution, and graduate assistantships. But I think for me, it was more about approach. So in my undergrad, it was a lot of get the information and, retain it the best you can and give it back out to the instructors or your professors. And when I went into my master's program, it was the first time I'd ever taken an attempt at research. So you're really starting to think differently as far as being able to kind of investigate and explore a little bit about different topics and, what that means. What does it mean to actually be a researcher? And especially when we look at Indigenous paradigms and what does that mean whenever you're combating Western paradigms. And now that I'm in my PhD program, that's a lot of what I'm up against. It's can you synthesize the work? Can you look at different theoretical frameworks and how are they at play? And it's really complex. I look at it as like a spider web. It's just, and so yeah, those are some of the things that I've experienced as far as what's different.
I'll go next. For me, I think that the difference in work from undergrad to graduate is, I often have to remind myself that the graduate work is what I love to do. It's what I want to do, even when it's hard. And that's in undergrad, it was more like, okay, just do it and you'll be fine. But in graduate work, I just feel like more is on the line in a good way. And you have to really think about your approach and remind yourself that this is what you love to do, that you want to be here, even when it's hard, even when you're studying while everyone else is playing. So I think that's the difference for me is the workload is definitely more intense. My usual schedule is like I work Monday through Friday, and Saturdays I study all day. And now Sunday evenings I study with a tutor who is my dad, but he's helpful. So, I mean, I really put in the work now.
Wow, Dr. Still, you're making me like dig in the vault because my undergrad to master's pathway was over 18 years ago. So I had to really think back. I think, and I'm going to kind of approach this from a different angle, but for me, deciding to go on to get a master's degree after 8 years from my undergraduate completing my undergraduate degree was sitting in my job, working in student services, and realizing that there were more tools that I needed to add to my skill set, because there were ways that there were students who were coming into my office and I wanted so badly to help them. And I thought I knew the right way to do that. But then, you just stumble. Sometimes you just have to stumble through it with the students in order to really help them. And so just really reflecting on me wanting to provide the students with their own tools so they can advocate for themselves really made me realize I needed to go into a graduate program. I also had mentors, American Indian mentors, who were very encouraging, including my family, always, replanting that seed in my head, like education, the answer is education. And so was able to find a graduate program that really prepared me to better help students. And so if I would have went right out of my undergraduate into a graduate program, I don't know that I wouldn't have stumbled upon the graduate career that I then the path that I proceeded to follow. So for me, the difference was not really knowing what I wanted my career to be. I knew I wanted to be in higher ed, but I didn't know exactly what that looked like. And then being able to get some experience under my belt and then find a program that would better prepare me to help students.
And I think all those stories, there's some intersection, and then there's differences amongst all of our pathways. Because I know with me, when I transitioned from my undergrad to my graduate work, I didn't see myself going to graduate work. I was voluntold to go for my master's. And so I think some of us share those same experiences of having those advisors and mentors like, no, you can do it. Yeah, you have this pathway. But I think one of the things that I think Arland and I believe Kristen may have touched on a little bit was this idea of, this is something that you want to do. And I think for me, that was one of the biggest differences between my undergrad work and my graduate work is sometimes students don't realize when we do our graduate work, all of our classes are focused in the area that we want to be in. We're no longer doing gen eds or having to take, in my case, like math courses, because me and math, very, very quickly divorced in early years of undergraduate work. But, not having to take all these other courses that we might not necessarily be interested in, but we know is important to the undergraduate experience. But at the graduate level, we're really doing the work that we want to be doing, and we're doing the work that interests us and that really we focus on. And for me, like, while the level of work was more intense, I enjoyed it so much more. I enjoyed it so much more and engaging with it so much more, and cursing so much more because I didn't know how much I didn't really know until I started working in the graduate work. And so I really do appreciate hearing all your stories and kind of piggybacking off that first question of, what was that transition like? Because I'm reading the comments that are coming through here, and we have a lot of people with us today that are contemplating going back. We have a lot of people that are currently in their graduate programs, and they're just so excited to be able to hear these experiences and I think reflect their own experiences on what they've witnessed in our own stories. But thinking back, is there one piece of advice or maybe a couple pieces of advice that you might have for those students who are beginning that transition or in that transition? I think one of the things we talked about yesterday was sometimes these transitions may not happen right off the bat. There might be things that we come up against or we transition into our first or second year in grad school that we're not really sure how to navigate. And so are there any, either a pearl of wisdom or a piece of advice or even pieces of advice that you would give to any of our listeners today about how to transition or how to navigate grad school? And then we'll start, Dr. Beaumont Hill, we'll start with you.
Again, just connecting with those mentors that you've had who've encouraged you to get to where you are. I think asking questions, we're not always trained to ask questions. And in graduate school, it's really important that you develop your comfort level and ask in approaching how you're going to ask questions. I know for me, I think it was probably the first year before I really felt confident in the questions I was asking, because a lot of times we're sitting in these classrooms and these cohorts, and we are the only American Indian representation in that group. And so, you know, we sometimes question, why am I thinking about this differently? Or why do I not see it the same way as my peers are seeing it or understanding it? And so really just building that confidence in who you are as an American Indian person, as a tribal person, and really just finding those people who are going to be your champions, who are going to, that you can ask those questions to in confidence, and they will continue to encourage you and support you and provide guidance, I think is probably the biggest key to when I think about my support network. A lot of times I just didn't know I just felt like I didn't know what I was doing. And so I could have those honest conversations with my mentors and my family and friends who are supporting me. And so really finding that group of people you can go to.
I think that's important in any aspect, is finding that community. You know, sometimes we forget how important community is as we find it and we wrap ourselves in it in our undergraduate programs. But we forget sometimes to still access that community, and you know, that community doesn't leave us when we get into grad school. That community is something that we really need to tap into and exist with in order to thrive. You know, we can survive, but in order to thrive, we need to be able to access that community. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll go. For me, it was utilizing my network. I think, you know, you either know someone or you know someone who knows someone, and to ask questions of people in your network. My MBA is actually my second master's degree. My first one is in Indigenous language immersion. And when I was thinking about going back to school for the second master's degree, there were 3 programs I was very interested in. And I asked like 8 people who I either knew personally or was connected through a friend who had one of those 3 degrees. And I just asked every question I could think of. They were very nice and helpful people. And in the end, that's how I decided to pursue my MBA. I didn't know that this is where it would lead me, but I trusted the people that I spoke with. I thanked them for their time. And they were very honest. And I think that honesty and candor was very useful to me in choosing a grad program. Once I was in grad school, I really, like Dr. Beaumont Hill said, like I leaned on my resources, who was in my corner, who could I talk to about this. Some of the people who had MBAs that I spoke with would check in on me from time to time. Hey, I know you're in this program. How's it going with you? You know, don't get this professor, get this one, that kind of thing. So that was really helpful.
And I think you bring up a great point as well, is, you know, not only do we have community outside of our program, but we also have to build community inside and be able to get those insights like, hey, don't take this professor. You know, I know for me, especially more when I was in my PhD program, it was, okay, you may not consider this one, like this is what they're going to be expecting, or this professor is going to do this, or this professor is going to expect that. And really, that's a part of the graduate experience, is not only learning from these professors, but learning from your colleagues and learning from your fellow scholars and students in the program with you. So wonderful point. Anyone else?
I will just kind of echo off of what Kristen had mentioned. I was like, it took me a while to decide on a graduate program and what I wanted to do. And most of the time it was my director, my executive director coming to tell me like, you should pursue this, like you're good at this, you can do this. And I think that that's where in my own mind, I was like, I don't think I'm ready. I don't think I'm ready. Not this year, not this year, not this year. And it seemed to be a continuous loop up until like now. I'm like, now is the time. I've figured out like my life, everything's stable, everything's good, and really just evaluating the amount of time that I can dedicate toward the program to get the results that I want. Because I do think that's something that I try to look at with just any type of education is I want the best education that I can provide for myself. And it really is just being present and being aware of all the information that is coming in. And I'm definitely excited just to kind of see how things go forward. And just really knowing that you decide like your education, and that's the best part about like graduate school, of you get to find out what you actually love.
I love that self-exploratory, being able to navigate and being able to look at, especially if you're in a research-based program, even in your master's thesis or a capstone-based program, being able to look at some of the cause and effects, or looking at how, even how business can impact Indian country and impact our communities for the better. JJ, we wanted to offer some space up to you.
I'm going to apologize. The audio is really delayed, so I'm not getting the question.
Just if you have any advice or anything like that for any of our listeners about transitioning to graduate school.
No, I don't think I can say anything that hasn't already been reiterated, but really, look at who's in your network and your support and your mentors, because those are the people that you're going to pull on throughout your entire journey. From the time you're an undergrad to, graduate school, it's really those people who you surround yourself with. And looking back, I think about all the times I ever had a doubt or a worry or didn't know how to write a certain cover letter or anything like that. I just always could know I can rely on my support. So build your team, build your community, and really just rely on those people, because it's going to matter.
And again, I couldn't agree more. I think there's a lot of times, because you don't know what you don't know. And so sometimes you have to be able to ask for help and be able to ask how to write certain things or approach certain things. So I think that's great advice. And Dr. Beaumont Hill, you actually touched on something when you were speaking before about this idea. Sometimes, especially as Native scholars, there are a lot of times that we are in these spaces by ourselves, right? That we are in these spaces. We might be the only Native in that class, or we might be the only Native in that program. I know there have been a number of instances in my own journey where I've been tokenized as, oh, well, he can speak on all Natives and things like that because I was the only Native in the class. But I think it goes a little bit further than just that tokenization, because there's often times that we might feel like we're imposters. So, most of us, we understand that imposter syndrome is a real thing. This idea that, am I good enough to be here? Am I supposed to be here? Am I smart enough to be here? I will be the first to admit that I had all those thoughts, and my advisors and my mentors will be the first to admit that they were the ones like knocking those thoughts out of me, but they're still there. So the question I want to pose to you all is, while navigating your graduate experience, did you ever experience this imposter syndrome? Did you ever have any experience with it or thoughts about it? And if you did, what were some of the tools or strategies that you used to kind of navigate your way through it? I won't say beat it, because I don't think we ever fully beat imposter syndrome. I know it came back right after I graduated with my PhD, and I'm like, do I really deserve this degree? How did I get this degree? So I won't say beat imposter syndrome, but to deal and navigate with it. And then we'll go ahead and start with Kristen.
Yeah, when I think about imposter syndrome, I'm trying to gather my thoughts. So in my current program, there are 3 Native Americans in a class of, I want to say 140. And so we have our own group chat. And we're not in the same, the way it's set up, we're not in the same like cohort per se, but we still talk to each other. And I've really gotten to know them and respect them. And there is that, like, we're it. I remember our first meeting, one of the other natives came up to us and was like, "Where are there more?" And I was like, "No, it's us. There's 3 of us." And so from that day on, we started a group chat and just like, good luck at finals, good luck at midterms, that kind of thing. And so I think having others with you is helpful. I understand that a lot of times, like, we're in classes alone and have to deal with that. That's when I think the confidence really has to come in, and I just have to remind myself, like a little mantra, like, I deserve to be here. I did the same work as everyone else, and my spot, I didn't take away from anyone. I earned this spot.
And I think that's so important, just to remind ourselves, because sometimes we can get like lost in those thoughts. We can get lost in like, do I really belong here? And just knowing that, no, you do. And I think one of the things with that is having those conversations with your fellow classmates, because I know for one point in time, it wasn't even it was a non-native classmate, and I was like, wait, you feel like that too? He's like, you feel like that too? I was like, yes. Oh, okay. And here I thought they were like the star person in the class, and I was like, okay, all right, I feel a little bit better. I got this. You got this. We got this. We're gonna get this together. Anyone else?
Yeah, I can go. Well, I have the question and the audio's not. But I would say do it afraid. And one of my mentors and my native aunties, Dr. Shotton, is always telling me, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Thinking about from the very beginning of my journey, I was terrified to leave my home because, we're such close-knit family and my community. I was scared going to class because I would go to my zoology lecture and you could literally fit my entire high school into those seats, with staff and students. And I remember I was overwhelmed. Then I was scared getting into even thinking about the idea of getting my master's, because I was like, you have to take a GRE, what's this, what's that? And then even now, I'm scared because of the course load and because of the expectation. And like Dr. Saad said earlier, there's a certain level that I think the institution kind of expects you to operate at. And there's a lot of things at play, especially I think as Indigenous people, where we're combating these spaces because they're not designed for us. They did not have us in mind, and none of this was created for us. And so my best advice is just do it afraid. Even with your knees knocking, your teeth chattering, do it afraid, do it anyway, because everything you're wanting and everything that you're trying to attain is on the other side of fear. And I agree with Kristen that, creating those mantras and affirming to yourself that you deserve to be here. That is something I've carried with me continuously every day I've either stepped foot on campus. Is just, pulling on my culture, pulling on my indigeneity, my people. It's knowing that I deserve to be here because we do. And I think for me, that's made the most difference and it's been powerful. So.
And I think that sums it up perfectly. Do it afraid. Do it afraid. I mean, I think those are powerful words in and of themselves, JJ. And you definitely are doing it. Whether you're afraid or not, you're definitely doing it. And so proud to see these up and coming scholars like the future Dr. Wagnon sitting with us, who are combatant and continuing that good fight. Dr. Beaumont Hill, Arlen, did y'all have anything?
I think Kristen and JJ really said everything that I was thinking. For me, I didn't even know what imposter syndrome was. I have this group chat we call the Sisterhood, and we're all Native women professionals in higher ed, and we started our career together, and we've just continued to support and love each other. And I remember putting something on there about like that self-doubt, and one of my friends, Rachel, says, I think that's imposter syndrome. And I was like, what? I had to Google it. And then I'm like, holy cow, I was like reading down the checklist of what imposter syndrome is. And then after I was able to identify that, I thought, I am not going to let this stop me, because I just like what Kristen said, I earned my spot. I worked hard to get where I'm at. And it was, I really had to pull from that. And I really appreciate what JJ said about just reminding ourselves where we come from, the people we come from, the cultures that we come from. That outweighs anything that anybody else can bring to that table. And it's really unfortunate to me, who I really believe in education. I believe that it empowers us on many levels, but it's sad that the system that we have to go through to get those credentials is created to make us feel like we don't belong there. And so it's really unfortunate. And so I just want to reemphasize what JJ said about remembering who you are and where you come from and the people you come from, because right there, that just proves that we have earned our spot. So that would just be my additional comments.
And I think that those are wonderful comments, again, drawing back to what both JJ and you just said, leaning on those that support us, our communities, our culture, our traditions, our prayers. I think that's what makes, especially as Native people and as Indigenous people, that's where we find strength in. That's where we find the ability and the tenacity to continue on. And that's critical, not just in education, but once we become professionals, once we get into the workforce, making sure that we remember where we come from, and just utilizing that as a way to propel us and keep us centered and keep us grounded in the work that we have to do. Arlen?
I feel like everybody had really great words. I actually had a conversation with all of my siblings this past weekend because we had a birthday party and our bellies were full, and so we're like, let's go for a walk. And during that time, we're 5 college graduates walking, talking about imposter syndrome, and the oldest is like, what is that? And it was an eye-opening conversation, just because the youngest had to teach the oldest what it meant. And she was like, oh, I definitely experienced that. And during that time, we had the ability to share a lot of our stories and just everything that we've experienced in not just education, but in the professional world, because most of us are have been in organizations and things like that off the reservation and out of our communities. And we talked a lot about how our dad was the one who raised us to say, the only one who can stop you is you. And that's something that we've always said to one another, like over and over and over. And it is the one thing that does keep us going and persisting through education and our careers. And I was like, that's the only thing I ever really think about when I doubt myself, is the only person who can stop me is me.
I think I don't know about the rest of the listeners, but I just get chills listening to all of your stories, because there's so many powerful phrases and just these pearls of wisdom that one of my Indigenous aunties calls them, that are just being shared here today. The only person that can stop you is you. And I think even as I reflect on my own experience, there was a lot of times that I recognize now that it was self-imposed. Some of it was self-imposed and thinking, okay, I don't belong here, or I can't do this. So I think, especially with a lot of our listeners, we have a lot of people, again, commenting in about where they are in their program, whether it be like Miss Ashley Carter from looks like NSU in Tahlequah, how she's doing her graduate studies there. And I think we have another one, Stephanie Haskins from the Red Cliff Tribe, who's doing her work there right now too. And hopefully this is resonating with all of you all. And as we move into kind of the next questions, I just want to remind all of our listeners, wherever you're at, whether with us or on the live feed, please keep sharing your stories, keep asking questions. We have this great wealth of knowledge here on this webinar today. And if you have questions or, things that you might not even have thought about or have wanted to know about, please feel free to ask and share. So I want to kind of switch up the conversation, because we talked about transition and we've talked about imposter syndrome, but there's another piece of graduate school that is both similar and different, I would say, than undergrad, and that's funding. So the similarity of funding is we have access to scholarships, we have access to grants and loans and things like that. But once you really become a graduate student, there's a whole new field of assistantships, whether that be graduate assistantships or research assistantships or teaching assistantships, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and how we go about getting those. So the next question I kind of want to pose to everyone is, what are some best practices or strategies that you could provide to some of our listeners to help pay for graduate school? And then with that, if you did like an assistantship or something, how did you go about applying for that assistantship? And was there like a negotiation piece that happened with that assistantship? But we just kind of want to talk about some of these funding sources and how you all may have subsidized or supported your graduate funding. And then I think we'll go ahead and start with JJ.
So I was very blessed when beginning my academic career because I am a Gates Millennium Scholar. And so my entire education has been paid for from my undergrad up to this point. But what I will say is, there are so many great organizations like AIGC, and I would say get organized as far as like looking at deadlines and requirements, keep a file on Google Drive, open up Google Docs so you can save your responses, because a lot of these questions are very similar. So you can just keep kind of copy pasting, editing on different questions. And as far as the GA-ship, I think this ties back into what we were talking about earlier. Don't be afraid to ask questions, that network and that support that you have. I would, depending on the department or who is around in your, classes and everything, just ask questions, let them know that you're interested. I would use resources, because I know for OU, they'll post a lot of jobs too on like their bulletin boards and on different sites, and start getting organized with going through those and seeing the requirements. A lot of times too, if you strike up, a conversation with these professors because they're really wanting someone to come help them, and you're making your face and your voice be heard, they will, they want the initiative, and they will take that into consideration as well. So really it's just, utilizing that support and asking around and being organized and strategic. And yeah, that's the advice I'll offer.
Thank you so much, JJ. Anyone else have any pieces of advice or things like that?
I'll go. I have I have been fortunate enough to have my programming paid for. But with my Rising Native Graduate Scholar, they were looking to apply to a GA, and we did a once through on the application and took copied and pasted the questions into a Google Doc so they could just answer it in a Google Doc and then copy and paste that back in when they're ready to apply. I think that was useful. Another thing we did for funding was we actually created a Google Sheet and just spent 2 hours scouring the internet for anything related to their program, anything related to being Native American, anything related to first time college student, that kind of thing. And we just compiled a list, and we added tabs in there like dates that they're due, special supplemental materials they may need. And we had a really good list going. So when the time came for funding, they were able to apply. And again, what they did was we created a shared Google Doc where they put their personal statement on there, and we edited it to the point where they could just copy and paste it into various scholarships. You don't have to recreate the wheel every time. I think oftentimes people think you have to do that. If you use the same statement, if it's a good one, you can tweak it, take out parts here, add parts there. And then another thing they did was they actually took it to their writing center. And if you're not in undergrad or in school right now and you don't have access to a writing center, usually public libraries will have one, or you can just ask a close confidant to read over your statement. And so then it was edited professionally, which really helped them.
And I love that idea, because I think that's something that I work with students all the time and be like, if you have a strong personal statement, if you have a strong essay, reuse it, reutilize it. And then also yes on the writing centers. I will be the first to tell you I am not a strong writer. If spell check got me through my PhD. Spell check and Grammarly, they don't sponsor, but I will tell you this right now, they got me through my PhD. And if you have access to a writing center, please definitely go. Definitely go. So those I think are some great pieces of advice on being able to make sure that you're presenting your strongest self when you're applying for these funding sources or you're applying for these GA-ships. Because oftentimes, that we can't stress enough how important it is in those essays. I have sat through a number of graduate scholarship readings as a reviewer for some of our partner organizations and things like that. And sometimes that scholarship essay or that personal statement is what we have to get to know you, and making sure that's presenting your best self in that, telling your story and using your voice. I think that's critical. So thank you so much for those words, Kristen. Dr. Beaumont Hill, Arlen, do y'all have anything you want to add?
I would just add again, utilize that network. I had a TA-ship, I had a research assistantship, and I had a fellowship. And and I had scholarships through AIGC, through Cabell Scholars, just really digging back into your networks, knowing the funding sources that you used in at the other levels. They also probably have graduate funding as well. But the networks, the way I got connected with both my fellowship and research assistantship were because I stayed connected with people on campus and continued to work, and they knew the type of research I was doing, and they were like, hey, I have an opportunity on my team, or this came up, are you interested? And so really keeping that network up to date on what you're doing and what your research is focused on, so they can also mentor you in that funding realm too.
Thank you for that. Arlen?
I feel like everybody covered everything. I also just wanted to add that there are things to ask, like even if you're employed, some employers help cover college expenses. So definitely make sure that you are also asking your employer. I was like, everybody else covered everything else that I would suggest though.
Thank you. So we actually have a really interesting question that just came from Craig from Facebook. And I think this is really important because sometimes I know I've struggled with this question too. And so I want to just pose it to the panelists. And if you have a response, please feel free to respond, but I don't expect everyone to respond here. Craig asks if a First Nation or a tribe is investing educational dollars toward its citizens to gain a higher education. What are our thoughts that that student owes a corresponding duty toward their First Nations or tribe and providing their expertise back to the community? So what are your thoughts between that? Do we have thoughts on that expectation? While you kind of think about that, I'll respond with, I think there's a way in order for us to all to give back to Indian country. I know I struggled with that. So right when I finished my program, 4 days later, I moved 2 states away to begin the work that I do here with AIGC. And I struggled with that because I know I had a responsibility to give back to my tribal community, but I had to set, and it took me a little while to begin to understand that I am giving back to my tribal community. By doing the work that I'm doing now, I might not be directly impacting my tribal community, but I still am impacting my tribal community in a way that is positive because one, I'm showing that my other tribal members that I can get it. I can't do that. There can be another Katua person out there that has a PhD and can go and do these things, but also I'm working in the realm of education for Native students, and that includes my Katua people. So for me, that's how I've kind of navigated that. Realizing that we can still do work, and even in the corporate world, I've had the pleasure of knowing a number of scholars who have talked about. There's one scholar in particular that I've read one of her applications that she talked about. Once she was done, she was an engineering student, and once she was done, she wanted to go and work for this very prominent company. But one of the things that she wanted to do, and that she had the ability to do with this prominent company, is to give back to her community in the Navajo Nation. And she wanted to develop ways that could better extract water without causing environmental damage to provide water access to her community. Now, that company she's working for doesn't directly work in Indian country, doesn't directly work for Navajo Nation, but she still had that plan to give back. It's that ability to give back. So I think there are multiple ways for us to approach that. But I just wanted to open it up if maybe one or two people have comments or questions or answers or suggestions to Craig.
I wanted to add ways that I give back to my community are I host a website where I give college access advice specifically to Dinesh students and really building a lot of that connection there. I think that there are just using your network, you have the ability to find ways to give back. I've had conversations with people from the Navajo Reservation who needed training in how to teach high school students to complete FAFSA, things like that. I think that there are many ways to continue to give back to your community, even if you're not in your community. And it's I'll be 100% honest, I have not been back home since college, and I'm slowly trying to find my way back. But during the time that I've been away, I've been always trying to figure out ways to give back. And there are other programs out there that do have a lot of those direct connections.
I'm just going to add that I feel the same way as Corey, being 300 miles away from my my home community. It does sometimes, I think about it and how am I giving back, and am I still contributing to the people who prayed for me and supported me and made and allowed me to be the person that I am today and have the profession that I have. And so I know it comes with mixed emotions and mixed thoughts. But the other way I feel like I give back is just like Corey said, working for American Indian programs, working with American Indian populations, but also I'm a resource when my relatives send their, daughters and granddaughters and nephews to U of M. They say, go find Salena, or go see Salena if you need help, or I get Facebook messages about, different things. And so I'm always responsive to that, because I do feel a responsibility to be a mentor to new students who are coming into this place that's so far away from home. But the other thing to remember is that because our communities are so tight and we're all connected in some way, remember that people are watching you, and they by you being accomplished and taking on these challenges, they see you, they're watching you. And that is also another way to give back, is by showing people back home that this is possible. There are opportunities out there, and they're possible.
And so we had another question come in from one of our listeners, and I'm going to go ahead and address this one directly, because there's multiple answers to it. And so this is specifically from the Gates Scholars, and asking, did receiving an assistantship affect our funding? So there are multiple ways that it could potentially. What I would suggest is reach out to your GMS advisor. If you're under AIGC, that would either be Krista Moya or Michael Bates. So please reach out to them to ask those specific questions. I will tell you this, I know from my experience, I too am a Gates Scholar. I did have a GA-ship, both in my master's and my PhD. And some years there was a change, some years there wasn't. So it's all dependent on not only the GA-ship factors, but some other factors that are aligned with them too. So I would definitely reach out to our GMS staff to ask those specific questions. But thank you for that. Thank you for that question. And unfortunately, our time is coming to an end here. And so I do just want to thank all of our participants, all of our panelists, all of our listeners for being with us here today. And I wanted to ask if there was any one last piece or one last word of wisdom, because there's no way we can cover every topic that regards to transitioning and first year experience. I know me and Arlen, when we were brainstorming these, we would be here for a half a day if we wanted to cover all the different topics, and still felt like we wouldn't have enough time. But is there one last piece of advice, or one last piece of those, again, like I said, my auntie says, the pearls of wisdom that you would like to give to any of our listeners with us today? And I'm going to kind of just open it up to the general floor here.
For me, one piece of advice that I have found to be very useful is I have blank note cards, and I write thank you notes all the time. I think showing gratitude and just saying thank you to the people who offer advice, to the people who've helped you, to classmates or teammates, it really goes a long way. And to the point where people will be like, I remember that note you wrote me, that was so nice. And when you're doing your graduate journey, you have to be grateful and thankful for what you have. And so a piece of advice I would give is to write that thank you note.
Anyone else?
That one was hard to follow, Kristen. That is so important, and it continues to give. So thank you for saying that. Mine is a little more, be selective in the programs that you are applying to, be selective in the courses you're taking, because this is you're developing your professional career. And so just be intentional and be selective.
Thank you
I've
so much
been-
for those. Oh, go ahead, Arla.
I was gonna steal James's advice of do it afraid. I was like, I wrote that down on my paper and it's gonna be something that's gonna stay there and be on my wall from now on.
That's what I was gonna say is just do it afraid. Don't be afraid to push back, ask questions, put yourself out there. I know for, you know, a lot of Native men, especially in higher education, we don't, and Native people in general, we have a lot of pride because we don't want to ever be perceived as weak or don't ever want to, you know, ask for that help because that's just how some of us are raised. But I would just say push back, ask questions. You are giving a lot of your time, your effort and energy, and you can't get those things back. And those are very sacred. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there. So.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you so much to all of our listeners and those that were with us today in the Zoom and with us on Facebook Live. I would encourage you all, please go and view the resources that we have at American Indian Graduate Center. You can find those at aigcs.org/students. Again, that's aigcs.org/students. Or you can always reach out to our student programming team by just emailing programming@aigcs.org. And that's programming with 2 M's at aigcs.org. So again, we just want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you, panelists, Widow, to all of our panelists for being here. And we just hope that you will have a wonderful day. Thank you all.